Hello, so today I'm going to be talking about the content from week 6, which was Nation. And in this week's content, I found that there were many correlations and connections I made between the made-up preconceived notion of national identity and how that ties into First Nations history. So first, national identities can be described as inherent power structures thriving off political and economic misconceptions fed to us as a society by governmental powers. So the idea that national identity is a sacred part of our identity, shaping who we are from the moment we're born and bringing us together with shared ideological, political, and sometimes cultural belief, fosters solidarity and strengthens an idea of extreme nationalism, which works in the favor of whichever country you're talking about. So this concept is additionally enhanced when we bring in socially segregating concepts such as racism, ethnocentrism, sexism, and classism, and these allow the idea of us versus the other to foster. And through historical events introduced to North America during the colonization of indigenous lands, the borders made up by colonizers coming from Europe were extremely disruptive to the lives that the First Nations led up to the occupation of their land. So the natives were treated with extreme disrespect and violence from the lands that they had occupied since the beginning of time. And this led to centuries of ostracization of the First Nations and trying to eliminate their history, culture, and spirituality. So this is exemplified by the creation of residential schools in Canada, which were government-backed and religiously sponsored elementary and high schools, whose main purpose was to assimilate First Nations into the new westernized culture brought to Canada by Europeans, which was mainly religiously based. And they ran from 1831 until 1996. So the assigned documentary, of this week, which was Stolen Children, interviewed people who attended residential schools, and they discussed the physical and mental abuse that they were put through, as well as the attempted ethnic cleansing. And this week we also read Edith Robinson's Son of a Trickster. So the book employs a lot of stereotypes which are normally given to First Nations. So Jared, who's the main character, he's a young Aboriginal man. He's confused in his identity, his own, how he perceives himself, and he abuses substances throughout almost the whole book. His family situation's kind of falling apart. He can't trust the adults in his life. And the use of magical realism at the end when the author brings in the Ouija and explains the Haisla First Nations correlation to the Ouija and how they think about it was a really cool concept to me, because it really allowed me to take a look into the spirituality that comes with the Ouija for the First Nations, for the Haisla Nation. So I thought the magical realism was a really cool element of the book, and it made it seem very realistic, which is a concept used by authors who employ magical realism to kind of make it more normal, make the magical element more normal. And I also thought it was kind of nice to see Jared going back to his indigenous roots when he learns about the Ouija, and because he was kind of straying off, not really understanding his culture, and that kind of connects him in the end. I also really enjoyed the modern connections that the book made, specifically from the I Don't Know More movement. For example, in chapter 18, we see Sarah going to an I Don't Know More protest, and she's wearing the clothes of the oppressor. So she assumes that she's going to get arrested, and that if she's wearing, more white-looking clothes, more standardized Western clothes, that she will be treated better and be allowed to call a lawyer. And I think this connection really allowed me to connect to the timeline, since I Don't Know More is an ongoing movement, and we can still see some protests coming from that movement. So I thought that was really cool. And overall, this week opened my eyes to the idea of national identity, I think, as a socially constructed phenomenon, as I don't really think I ever processed how socially constructed national identity was and how it is meant to put us into separate groups and kind of cages. I also thought that Edith Robinson's Son of a Trickster and the ongoing struggle of First Nations in Canada really made this week a lot more relevant to us, and it was definitely captivating to see how national identity played into Jared's life as the main character. And that's all I had to say for the content this week. So thank you so much, and I'll see you in class.